China now lashing out at the U.S. once again after President Biden called the country's leader a dictator. Eamon Javers here to discuss. Hi, Eamon.
Welcome. Tyler, this is a fascinating moment because the president was speaking before a group of fundraisers, right? So these are donors. He's comfortable. And in those settings, I've been in those rooms where presidents get to meet the wealthy and hobnob with them. There's no camera in front of them. You know, there's a press pool there, but they're off to the side behind the curtain. And it kind of gives this feeling of intimacy where presidents can sometimes say a little bit more than they might have wanted to say.
Think of Mitt Romney a few years back,
exactly.
In the middle of the campaign.
Exactly. Yeah. So that could have been what happened here. And you see an immediate reaction from the Chinese side saying, hey, wait a second, that's, uncalled for. But the president clearly expressing what he really thinks behind the scenes. And there's been a sea change in Washington, D.C. in terms of the approach to China. Going back 20 years, the approach was engage, let's do trade, let's have a positive economic relationship. Now, though, a lot of officials that I've been talking to are sort of reevaluating that whole approach. Was that the right call for the global economy and for American democracy? We happen to have a documentary tonight looking at Chinese espionage against American companies. I've got an excerpt for you to play right now because I want you to see some of these officials expressing in their own words how they've sort of reevaluated that relationship. Take a look.
Today, the world we live in, the world we've all benefited from, was a world framed by an American-led order. Now, if they are dominant in these fields in the 21st century, the entire world will be responding to Chinese standards, which is leverage in and of itself over geopolitics, over decisions that policymakers can make, over society.
The old notion of 20 years ago what national security was, of who's got the most planes, tanks, ships, and guns, is no longer the case. Who has the most advanced wireless communications? Who controls overhead satellites? Who is going to make the most advances in synthetic biology or controls next generation energy? That is all within the gambit now of national security.
So that's Senator Mark Warner there. He's the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, and Senator Marco Rubio, the ranking member. Our documentary premiering tonight at 10 p.m. You'll hear more from them in the documentary. They wanted to do that interview together. We talked to them for a long time about setting that interview up. Both of those guys wanted to send a message by sitting shoulder to shoulder in that room with me to say, hey, this is a bipartisan issue.
It's one of the few areas. The alignment between the parties is not perfect on anything, and certainly not on China. But there is generally more of a shoulder-to-shoulder feeling on the approach to China these days.
You absolutely see that. And this reevaluation, Mark Warner, in another segment of the documentary, told me, he was on the wrong side of this argument, he feels, 20 years ago. He felt like if we do business with China, then, we'll make them more like us. There'll be a middle class. There'll be a culture of entrepreneurism. There'll be freedom of speech. Democracy will bloom. He says, now I realize that was the wrong approach. And a lot of officials, U.S. intelligence officials, say they are concerned that we thought doing business with China would make them more like us, and what it's doing is making us maybe a little bit more like them in terms of freedom of speech issues and other things. So some real concerns in Washington around this relationship. And you can see that the president's giving voice to that. And in the reaction on the Republican side to the president's comments today, you see a lot of, tentative reactions to it. Normally, it's just, ping pong the other guy's statement down. You're not seeing that as much today on that Biden comment.
And we'll be watching tonight, 10 o'clock. Eastern
Absolutely.
Time.
Yep.
Thank you, Eamon.
Got the plug in. Thank you.
Good. You got it.